So we have a really full panel today, so I think I'm going to go ahead and just get us started. I want to make sure we can leave some room for audience questions. So welcome everyone again. As we close this year's Open Ed Live, we wanted to bring together a few voices from across the University of Central Florida to reflect on how open education has developed on our campus. This conversation isn't necessarily about a single initiative or office, but we want to highlight the relationships, collaborations, and the shared efforts that have shaped this work over time here at UCF. So we're hoping to explore where our advocacy work began, what it looks like in practice, and what it's going to continue to move forward into our future facing plans. So for all panelists, I'd love to invite you to introduce yourself and share how your work connects to open education at UCF. Christian, if you could get us started.
Sure. Hello. First of all, thank you all to the organizers. I'm happy to be here, and thank you for all to join us. My name is Dr. Christian Beck. I'm a senior lecturer in the English department, and years ago, I was approached to help create one of the first OERs for mass consumption. And so that I have now created two OERs for two very large classes. So looking to save as much money for students as possible and kind of integrate it into my classes as quickly and easily as possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Stuart, if you go next.
Sure. Hello everybody. Thank you for being here. My name's Stuart Dees. I'm an associate instructor in the Department of Writing and Rhetoric, where I teach first year composition courses. I've been teaching first year writing here at UCF, ENC 1101 and 1102 courses since 2016. My role is particularly exciting because my classes are often one of the first classes students enroll in when they begin their academic journey here at UCF. My role presents a unique opportunity to highlight and emphasize college education, the value of it, and sharpen and develop students' critical literacies through focused writing and reading instruction. And particularly, I found open educational resources super helpful, for fostering student success, improving access, and many of the materials are available, or faculty created. And available for students at low or no cost. So that's a big win, and I'm super excited to be here and share my experiences with you all today.
Thank you. John, if you go next.
I'm John Venecek, and I'm the Humanities and Open Education Librarian here at UCF. And I have been here since 2007, and my interest in advocacy for open education in general goes all the way back to the very beginning of my time here as a librarian, back when the idea of open was still considered kind of a controversial topic that you always had to be kind of selling and advocating for. And as we'll discuss in just a minute in more detail, the first big OER project I also worked on was with Christian Beck with the anthology that we created for that class. And so I'll have a lot more to say about that in just a few minutes.
Thank you. Amber?
I'm the Administrative Project Manager for Textbook Affordability and Compliance at UCF. And my role really focuses on the administrative side of things. So really emphasizing how we can use low-cost materials or no-cost materials specifically to promote student success while maintaining compliance with our state requirements. And also overseeing the zero textbook cost marker that we have at UCF, syllabi posting and a few other things that kind of all interweave together. My background started actually in faculty development, where we helped run some early open education workshops for general education programs.
Thank you. Lily?
Hi, I'm Lily Dubach, and right now I'm the Open Education and Textbook Affordability Librarian for the University of Central Florida. And kind of similar to John, years ago, I helped Christian with one of those that first OER anthology that we were working on here. But I was a student assistant back then, and I was really inspired to try to figure out, hey, I would love for the library to work on, course material type stuff, how to support students in this area. So in a weird way, I kind of grew up in this library through the OER realm and am now in that role.
Yeah. And Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Taha. I am a data science and statistics student at UCF, and I'm also the student assistant for textbook affordability. The last couple of years, I've primarily been helping to track all the library resources as well as our open education resources being used. And I've been helping to optimize some of the systems we use to track what resources are being used in different classes.
Thank you, everyone. One of the things that stands out is just that open education at UCF has grown through so many different perspectives and full circle in student assistant realms. And those contributions didn't happen overnight, and they definitely didn't happen in isolation. So we're going to start by going back to highlight some of the early work that laid a bit of that foundation. So, Christian, you were involved in UCF's early OER projects. Could you briefly describe that work and what you were trying to accomplish?
Sure. I it was this kind of funny scenario that I didn't even know what open was or what OERs were, and then I got an email that had a large amount of people on it asking me if I wanted to develop an anthology for one of my large enrollment classes, and with a kind of a background in believing that all information should be available to all people at all times for little to no cost, I said, absolutely. Why would I not be involved in this? And so I went to what I thought was going to be a meeting of just, a handful of people. And I walked into a room with a lot of people that all were there to help me do what I wanted, what I had in mind. And at that point, I still didn't even know what I had in mind. Walking out of that meeting, I had a very clear sense of what I wanted to do, which was create a open resource for my students so that they didn't have to buy any text whatsoever, but also not skimp on the quality of what those texts were. And so my job was put to me to create a list of texts that I want to use. Now, this class was an English Literature 1 course, which spans from about 800 to about 1800. It's about 1,000 years of work, all condensed into a nice 16-week package. This involved a lot of texts that were available just because they were free outside of any copyright or anything like that. But the problem was quality. What is the quality of these? But I brought my list, and this amazing team at the library, at CDL, all over the campus went to work. And I joke about it, but it is more or less true. I provided the list, and all the work happened, at UCF and with the support system there. And so what ended up happening, I spent a lot of time talking with John Venecek, creating with what texts were applicable for this or usable. And so we had a lot of back and forth there. And then there was like all kinds of copyright and legal rights stuff that I didn't even know wasn't aware that was going on. But in the end, what we ended up producing was this wonderful OER that I've been using now for, I think, about 10 years, if not very, very close. Twice to two to three times an academic year with about 100 students per class. So over the course of time, and I get feedback from the students. I've been developing this, and yeah, it was a wonderful experience, low cost. And since I've done another OER for my world literature, introduction to world literature class, with and again, high enrollment done twice a semester. So those are kind of the early days of putting together the first anthology, which is still very active. I think I'm working on a third edition right now, but it's taking a little bit longer.
John, from the library perspective, what did supporting that work look like, and what had to be in place behind the scenes to make that happen?
Well, to start with, it's interesting to hear Christian talk about the very beginning and getting that email because I was actually the person who was doing the outreach at the time. We had an interest group in the library that Lily was part of, and a few other people who are no longer here. Well, actually, our Scout Comm librarian, Sarah Norris, was involved with that as well. And we wanted to work on a project like this, but the idea was we had to actually recruit somebody who was teaching a class to go in with us. And so I actually did outreach to all the departments I work with, and I got crickets across the board except for one person, and that one person was Christian. And I would actually reach out to individual people who I thought might be interested as well. And I would get responses like, no, why would I want to do that? That kind of thing. And so there was actually, to your question about institutional support, not only was there really no institutional support back then, there was actually barriers and pushback, people just not understanding the value of open. Why would I want to do that? I remember one of the complaints or one of the common complaints we would get was about, especially from like literature professors who were teaching these survey courses, the idea that those books that they would use in their classes were considered works of scholarship because very often they were annotated and they would have lesson plans and discussion questions, and kind of felt like we were taking something away from the people who had put those books together. That was one complaint. And I remember another one was like we were sort of interfering with the bookstore's right to sell books on campus by creating something that would be made freely available. So there were some copyright and other legal issues involved as well. So it was like very much a organic DIY kind of project where we were literally started as an interest group in the library where we wanted to do this and we wanted to do it really well. That was a really important part because we were among the first groups on campus to embrace the concept of open ed and actually create an OER. So we knew if we were going to do this, it had to be first rate because then people were going to see it. And once people saw like a really solid product, we knew that would help us build the case and help lead to other projects. And so we had a team of librarians. Then Christian came on board as really the only instructor who was interested. And there was even an instructional designer here at the time. And so, Lily mentioned that she was a student assistant at the time. Lily and I were the two responsible for kind of going out there and looking for the text that Christian wanted to use and make sure if they weren't clearly stated as open access, that we were actually getting copyright permissions. And this came up a couple times with like translations. I remember Christian, there was one case where he wasn't happy with any of the translations that we were able to find online. So he actually did his own translation, just like another indication of like the dedication, of like wanting to make this not just like cobble together existing free resources, but make them also like really the best possible that we could. And there were some other cases where we had to actually get rights. And so we were literally reaching out to people who owned the rights if they had done a translation or it was like a play adaptation or something like that. That was quite a long process, but we were actually able to do it. And then the instructional designer was the one who was kind of pulling it all together into a book that was actually like very readable and high quality. Um, so that's how it all happened. And that was just us working together as a group to make it happen. There really wasn't a support system in place. It was all like we were out there doing it for the first time, just trying to do the best version that we could. And that was the one that ended up being the book that Christian said he's been teaching for probably over 10 years now. So, yeah.
Talk about scale. So Lily, beyond this initial OER project, how have you seen more structural support for open evolve at UCF over time?
Yeah, definitely. As fun as those grassroots efforts were, it's been really amazing to see things evolve. So I can speak a little bit to how UCF launched the Affordable Instructional Materials Initiative, and OER is a core pillar there. And I believe that happened in about 2019, so a little more recently, but still some years ago. And that really collected cross-campus support. And so that was the Center for Distributed Learning, the libraries, the Faculty Center for Teaching and Learning, Office of the Provost and Academic Affairs, and the bookstore, all kind of getting together to talk about how do we support different efforts. Now, of course, OER was just a piece of that, primarily supported by instructional designers and librarians. And it came a little later that there would actually be a librarian with the title that included open education. But as things have evolved, the library now has strategic directives that includes providing support for course materials and removing those access barriers. And I was able to hire Sarah, that you'll get to hear from soon, kind of to be involved in tracking the growing exponential just work that instructors are putting into either adopting or adapting or authoring open educational resources. And as one of the librarians now, supporting these efforts, just being able to kind of find those avenues to do those workshops, to lead initiatives, to change the way faculty senate committees and launching other new councils, how it's going. It's just been a really beautiful thing to see all those changes and wide spanning supports.
Speaking of Sarah, we've heard a lot about this from the faculty and librarian perspective. I'd love to hear from the student side. Now, you've experienced open materials in multiple ways, both as a learner and through your work supporting that tracking. What has this experience looked like for you?
I think especially as a student, it was really interesting to get that like behind the scenes view to see just how much effort teachers who are looking into open education resources are putting into making sure, is this quality? Like, is this exactly what I want to be teaching my students? And it's been really heartwarming, especially to see the tracking grow of, I know these teachers, I know they're using these resources, but then after the last couple of years, I've seen there's more for me to track. There's more work for me to do, which is always a really good sign. But especially as a student, it was really interesting to see just kind of as I get later into my degree, even in my own courses, moving from just a single textbook being used to different OER sources, just chapters, bits and pieces here being used, and seeing just how varied the teaching styles can get when it comes to choosing what resources to use. It's been a really unique perspective.
Thank you. So we've heard a lot about how much coordination and support have gone into these efforts. Amber, from your position in the provost's office, how have you seen open education supported from that administrative level?
So I actually have to go back to the work that Christian and John did early on, because we built a lot of what we did subsequently off of, hey, here's three really cool projects that happened. So it's later than your first one, Christian. Now, how can we build on this to really expand it? And it actually started at the vice provost level for the vice provost of teaching and learning at the time, where we were doing a general education refresh. So we were really rethinking about how our general education program operated. I had just taken on textbook affordability from a compliance standpoint and was serving as the general education program project manager. Well, can we marry these two ideas together? And we had the opportunity to put forward a budget request to the provost's office for some additional funding to support OER work within the general education program. And I think that's really for me, the first time we saw the support at that level, from the provost level of, sure, here you go, have $60,000 to promote OER and general education over the course of 2 years. We were able to then run some faculty fellows, which led into workshops, 2 different workshops, one of which happened right as COVID hit. So we had to rapidly transition to a virtual environment. And we built off of the work that John and a lot of his colleagues, both the libraries and within digital learning, did. And we had some of those early workers come in and lead our workshop. So when people had been working on it since the start come in and start that workshop. And then we brought in faculty who had done some of it or who were very interested in continuing it. So we had those early years, that was around 2019 or so, right when AIM was starting. The AIM initiative is actually a provost level initiative, so it's housed within our office, but also within digital learning and libraries. As Lily mentioned, it's really a broad collaborative organization that works together from a variety of perspectives. Where I think we're releasing now, and I'll go into where we're wanting to head into the current. The broad level support is beyond just promoting it for cost, but going so far as our Vice Provost for Faculty Excellence, for example, really encouraging faculty to include it as part of their teaching award applications. We're trying to build it into promotion and tenure so that we have an institutional level support structure that values OER as faculty scholarship, but also as an innovative and effective teaching practice. And it is something that including our current provost, the last 3 current provosts have been a big supporter of. And I think that's allowed us to really wrap it in not just from a compliance supporting affordable materials from a state statute level, but also how it impacts a myriad of areas across campus.
Thank you. So this has laid all of the groundwork. Now moving to some of the present initiatives. John, you've been working closely with Stuart on a more recent project. Could you tell us about what that collaboration looks like in practice?
Yeah, so I also, after working with Christian on his anthology, I actually created another really widely used OER with another English professor called Strategies for Conducting Literary Research. And that's we've had that since about 2018 or 2019. And I know Stuart is my liaison in the Department of Writing and Rhetoric, and he told me that he's actually been using parts of that in his writing courses. And I think we've talked about this a couple times. We had a conversation early last fall about how nice it would be if that book could be actually adapted to the first year writing program, because there's a lot of stuff that can be like repurposed for that program, but it's really for literature students. It would be nice to have a version of it for actual writing students. And Stuart, somewhat to my surprise, decided to go all in with this idea. And I think initially the idea was that we were going to sort of like adapt that book for first year writing program. But now that we're actually into it, it's more like we're doing a different version of the book that's more of like a from scratch um, book that's actually tailored to the first year writing program. And this is another example of like kind of like what we did with Christian initially. The first thing you do is put together a team. And so now we've got a team of three people in writing and rhetoric, myself, another librarian, and then several advisors, including the director of first year writing and the director of our writing center, are all coming together to build what we plan on making like a freely available OER that can be like widely adopted throughout the first year writing program. So we started working on that last fall, and we're pretty deep into it now with the intention of having a draft of it done by the end of this semester. Then it can go for be used in a couple courses during the summer and be revised. It's just being used in the summer courses, and then have like a more polished version ready to go for wide adoption in the fall. And so I'll let Stuart take it from there.
Stuart, from the faculty perspective, tell us how this experience has been.
Oh, thank you, John and Rebecca. Oh man, so it's been awesome. OERs have played a large part in shaping this ebook project, but I have to first off thank John and his team in the library for helping out and bringing with him his institutional and historical experience with OERs. I really don't think it'd be possible to produce content at the level of quality that we're aiming for without guidance and input from our subject librarians, support from the University Writing Center, as well as lots of support from the first year composition program. Big shout out to the director, Dr. Shane Wood, who's one of our reviewers that John mentioned, and to the assistant director of first year composition, Nicholas Gardiakos, who is one of the contributing authors for this project. Another one of our contributing authors is a doctoral student in the Text and Technology program who also teaches composition courses for us. So it really, like John said, it requires a team to produce quality, student-centered, open access course materials. And what I found to be really neat about this project, aside from learning more about OERs and just resources available in general, are the connections we've made across departments and across programs here on campus. So right now, we also have two undergraduate students who've recently agreed to provide content like blurbs and illustrations. We have a very talented visual artist in one of my classes right now, ENC 1102 Composition 2, who will be featured in the text, both the current student and then the past student who they'll both be featured. And to me, that's super important because this project will not only provide access to disciplinary knowledge about writing and e-portfolios, which is kind of the focus of the book, crafting e-portfolios in first year composition, but it also empowers students and features their voices, and it includes them in the publication process, which, in my opinion, adds an additional layer of quality and authenticity to this project. And it really just aligns with everything we aspire to teach our first year writing students in our composition courses. So I would have to say, though, that Pressbooks as a software, CDL, many of the available resources on campus have been integral towards bringing our vision to life. And like John said, I mean, John has already published an OER, multiple OERs. So having him on the team has kind of given us, kind of a head start in producing these materials. I felt like when we started this project, we have the faculty expertise, we have the resources, so we just needed to sit down, plan out the project, and get to writing. And so far, it's been awesome. It's just been a great experience, and I think the students are really going to benefit in the long run.
Thank you. So, Sarah, from your perspective, what is one thing that students notice about open materials that faculty might not always see?
I think there's a couple major factors that I feel like a lot of professors don't get to see, at least from the student perspective. The biggest one is how much trust there is in a teacher the moment I see their syllabus has a link for me to go to the text or any resource available. It I never realized it up until my senior year that it's like even in my general education classes where I do have a choice between teachers, I gravitate towards the one where I'm like, okay, they care enough to tell me where to look for my resource. I don't have to spend the first couple weeks trying to figure out what it is exactly what edition. They've already told me what I'm supposed to be looking at. And that's just a huge sigh of relief. And I do tend to go into the classes a little bit more hopeful and a little bit more like they know what they're talking about. So it just builds a little bit of a level of trust there. But I think it's also having open education resources, especially if you have a couple options, gives students the opportunity to look at what is the learning style of the text and can I switch? Where I've had a couple classes where they had a couple different books or different chapters from it. And one chapter, I won't understand anything from one book, so I'll go back to the other book, see what they said, then go back to the other book. And just having those extra resources has been so beneficial and has allowed me to feel a little bit more confident about asking questions about more difficult subjects, especially as I get into more difficult math, being able to go back to OpenStax and being like, okay, if this is what they mean, what does this textbook mean with that context? It's been so helpful. But I think I also wanted to add on, it was really exciting to hear Stuart talk about bringing in students to this process because everyone I knew, our freshman, sophomore, and junior year, they're like, how do you approach a teacher to be part of that process? A lot of us, especially in STEM, want to go into higher academics. We want to stay on that PhD path and work at universities. And it's really important to get into a paper, get involved in the school, but there is that level of awkwardness. I don't know how to talk to somebody like that. So being able to reach out with that opportunity is so inspiring. It's really, really cool to hear that they're bringing that more to the students and giving us a hand to get started there.
Thank you so much. So we talked about the early groundwork, the evolving practice, and the collaboration that's continuing to make this possible. As open education continues to grow at UCF, we're also looking for new structures that are starting to take shape to help coordinate and support that work across. So Amber, UCF is launching the Open Education Coordinating Council through the Provost's office. What does that signal about where open education is headed here?
So first, the Open Education Coordinating Council, and Lily and Rebecca, I'm going to ask you to jump in here as I try to explain what we're doing, is really we're using council intentionally. It's an organization of like-minded, we'll say, individuals from across campus who represent each academic unit, student affairs, the provost's office, students at the undergraduate and graduate level, and a variety of other offices to really advocate for the use of open education broadly. So it's moving beyond just the use of OER, but to how can we incorporate open education within courses in a variety of different ways. So I see you guys nodding, so I think I covered the basics of it there. And I think what it really says gets to what Sarah was just saying. I was taking notes because I was like, she's saying why. She's saying why we did it. And it's really that how do we make this about student success broadly? So no longer just, okay, I saved my students $100, but what did I give them from a lifelong learning perspective? So really taking it the next step and moving it forward is part of our goal. And from an institutional standpoint, it was a great joy to me to walk to my supervisor, who's the senior vice provost for academic affairs, and say, hey, we want to do this. Do we have your support? And it was, of course. And the provost immediately, yes, we support this. It's a great idea. Let's do it. And so knowing that we have that top level administrative support in place for what is, as John mentioned earlier, 10 years ago, why are we doing this? Is really, I think, really speaks to the growth of open education at UCF from a grassroots movement to now an institutional culture. And that's really seen in what our faculty adopt within their courses. I know, Amanda mentioned in our last session that all general education anthropology courses use OER. Stuart's working on getting every ENC 1101 and 1102 course to use OER. Our college student success course uses OER. And those are just 3 areas off the top of my head where we've really made it a departmental culture because it's an institutional culture. And I think that's only going to grow as we highlight these different resources that are available.
That was beautiful. That was really well summarized. Thank you. Lily, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I think Amber captured it really well. I think I'm excited that the Open Education Coordinating Council will involve teaching faculty from every college. I think that piece, and they don't necessarily have to have had that background in open education. So it'll be a really great opportunity to kind of build that momentum and kind of lead back into that why that Sarah so eloquently stated.
Right. So for the panel at large, having heard these different perspectives, having revisited some of this history, in a sentence or two, I'd love to hear what you think makes open education work at UCF. We'll start with Christian.
I think that I'll start with like kind of the easy sense. It's the support that's given from so many departments and areas from around campus that encourage you to pursue this. And so just generally, it's the support that you have going in. As I was blind, it immediately became clear to me that this was just going to be a well-supported team effort to produce a really high-level product.
Stuart?
Yeah, I'll echo Christian's sentiment there. And I'll add that I think our students deserve as much quality, flexibility, and support as possible, both academically and financially. So I have to commend our hardworking faculty for their efforts towards making this movement possible. So for me, it's the support, but it's also really hardworking and invested faculty who make open education at UCF work.
Thank you. John?
I'd say we have a lot of very forward-thinking and collaborative faculty across the board here, and really good relationships between librarians, instructional designers, and instructors that make all this happen. Because as we've brought up several times here, like none of it would happen if there wasn't like this real strong sense of collaboration and teamwork.
Thank you. Lily?
2 things, and I recognize I'm biased, but I think the best people are involved. And I think we're all collectively the best because we genuinely care. And kind of like as Sarah was saying, when she sees that link to an OER in a syllabus, that raises her perception of that faculty member, and really grows in her respect for them. And then secondarily, I think we lead with recognition here too. We have the Aim High award event, and that highlights not only the instructors who adopted or adapted or created OER or other materials, but it also highlights who are the collaborators. How was it possible? So we all fully recognize each other. There isn't just one person leading the way. We're all collectively involved.
Amber?
Well, I think everyone summed it up pretty well with it started with faculty. And I think that's essential. We had buy-in. All too often, you get in higher education initiative and it's top down, and then you have to get buy-in. We started with the buy-in and how to get institutional support. And I think that made something special, but that we were able to get institutional supports really speaks to the collaborative efforts of everybody involved in it from a variety of institutions. And one thing I'll add that I think makes it interesting, and Sarah kind of hinted at this with the having links of OER within the syllabus, is we also highlight in the registration system. Students know that courses are zero cost for course materials when they go to register or shortly thereafter. And I've heard from from several students that we look for this. And so I think our communication piece is a really big part of it. We try to be as transparent at all levels as possible when it comes to promoting these resources.
And we'll close with Sarah.
I think one of the big things that why the open education system at UCF seems to work so well, at least from my perspective, is the faculty, especially who are involved, are excited about it, so they bring that excitement to their students. Like there's a very visible difference of classes that I remember what I learned and different techniques from, where teachers were excited about what they were teaching and had resources available to us, compared to teachers who just told us what the book was and told us to refer back to the book. It is a very big difference. And at least on the statistics and STEM side, all of my professors have talked so highly about how they get to do research and what they're looking into and bringing that to us. And I feel like it speaks a lot for the community that is fostered at UCF for making their like faculty excited to research and bring that to students. And it's just kind of goes back and forth. It's really cool.
Thank you. And with that, we'd love to open this up for some audience questions. Feel free to unmute or put something in the chat. I'm gonna put on my quiet teacher voice and let the silence speak for. Just about that long. So I'll get us started. Stuart, Christian, if a faculty member was interested in getting started in open education but didn't know where to start, what advice would you give them?
I'll start just from like because it all happened with the library reaching out to me or sending out these. Contact your subject area librarian. That would be the best place to start because then they will know exactly the kind of infrastructure that you will need, kind of what you're, and have a meeting. Just sit down and be like, I have this idea. Again, we keep coming back to the support, the vision, the collaboration. But because all of that is there, just come with the germ of an idea, and this amazing team will start making it happen. And like with options you probably didn't even know that you would have. And so just like reach out to your subject librarian with an idea, and the excitement that everybody else brings to it will excite you, and it will take off much faster than you could even imagine. Just kind of tapping into kind of what Sarah was saying about, the excitement that you have for the material that you have, it will become exponential as you go through the process. As weirdly as that sounds, because I know for a lot of people, the research, you get bogged down a little bit. This is not that. Just producing these, or it generates more energy.
Yeah, I have to second that. What Christian said. I'd say, yeah, take a trip to the library. Reach out to your subject librarian or instructional designer. Even visit the UWC, the University Writing Center. There's a lot of OERs that float around there, and individuals who are very experienced in using them in their classes or have had experience in the past integrating them into their courses. There's just so many helpful resources. And faculty who are more than willing to share their time and expertise with you to help you get started. And then you can go to UCF Pressbooks and just kind of peruse the collections there and see what's possible. Just get ideas, get inspired, and have fun with it.
Thank you so much. Now, I know we've got other UCF faculty champions in the audience. If there's any advice or anecdotes you want to share, either on voice or in the chat.
I'm not sure if this was mentioned yet. Sorry, I had to pop out and pop back in. But if you're looking for resources too, I might suggest looking at associations and societies related to your discipline. So, for example, I'm in anthropology, and so the Society for American Anthropology has an OER that we all widely use, and has open resources available for faculty. So, I would also suggest that as a starting point as well. Oop.
Yeah, one of the themes that's just we keep coming back to is that no one's alone in this. So reaching out to support staff on campus, other faculty colleagues, institutional partners, disciplinary partnerships, most of these things have been done in some capacities. So the spirit of open is that we can keep building on the work that other people have done and continuing to make that really relevant and contextualized.
And something I kind of would love to add on is especially hearing about the start of OER at UCF and how people were like, why would you even want to do this? I think, at least from the student perspective, even when I started working here, before I started working at the library, calculus and a lot of our STEM core courses like chemistry, physics, all of that, they use OpenStax. And so as a student, we get exposed to OpenStax and how high quality they are. They don't assume we know anything, and they do a really good job at making sure students get everything they need in the appendix and that it's easy to navigate. So at least as a student, if we're given open education in front of us, we don't come in with that stigma of why would you do this? It's free, is it not as high quality? OpenStax has set a really good precedent that like OER can be really good and sometimes better than some of the resources I've had to pay for in the past. So if that is a potential barrier, at the very least know that from the student perspective, we don't see that. We trust that as the professor, you're giving us a high quality resource. And we've had a lot of good experiences built into the very beginning of our education, especially at universities like UCF.
We have about 2 minutes, so time for all of the hearts at all times. I wonder if anyone on the panel could speak to any potential barriers to OER adoption that they've heard other people consider and any strategies that they might have to address those.
Just quickly. Oh, Stuart, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'll be quick. For me, the beauty of OERs is the lack of barriers, right? So I think that that's one of the things that make OERs so useful in our courses. There are, if a specific text isn't catered to your discipline, that might be a barrier, or you may have to adapt or write the author to change or remix some of the ideas. But that's one of the great things about OERs is that they're meant to be accessible.
Yeah, I guess I kind of building off of that, Stuart. And what I was going to say is like kind of and John mentioned some of the early questions around, oh, well, these big anthologies, is this putting, other people's labor and research under erasure? And no, it's not. It's adding to that volume of research that's already out there. Right. A lot of times these large, I mean, I used to use a Norton anthology of English literature. A lot of times the research that's in there, um, is pretty well known, and so a lot, and it helps the students kind of contextualize. Well, that's also part of my job as the instructor. And what I can do with an OER is tailor it specifically to what is currently happening. What can we make? How do we make these texts come alive again for that are 1,000 years old, without the kind of somebody that was, given a lot of money to just produce something for it. I'm not saying that that's bad. I'm not trying to, say that that's bad, but there's more of an investment when you put your own labor into your own course with the text that you present and kind of create the framework around it. Those are very useful tools, Norton anthologies or Longman or what have you. But when you can tailor it specifically to the students in your courses, to your style, that becomes even more important, I think, to accessibility of the text and the framework to the text that we're trying to convey.
I'm actually going to jump in because I like that Christian and Stuart actually provided the solution to one of the problems I've heard, which is time barrier. This takes a lot of work. And while we've emphasized how we have a really collaborative environment here, I think to Christian's point, emphasizing to faculty who are concerned about the amount of time, how it can be tailored to the needs of their class, the environment in which their class is taught, the specific subject area, really helps to emphasize the benefits and the importance of open education. It's not just American history anywhere. It's American history in Central Florida or North Florida or whatever state you're in your region, and we can tailor that to where students live and learn and what they need to know for where they're going to get their careers in the future. But I have heard, but it takes a lot of work. Well, if you have a collaborative team, maybe it's a little less work. It's spread across a lot of people.
And that brings us to Rebel's point in the chat that the community is there in all of these consortium level groups to really continue this conversation and offer the support. Thank you all. That takes us to the end of this panel. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Christian, Lily, Amber, Sarah, John. That was a really great conversation. And that unfortunately closes out this year's conference. I'm gonna share my screen super quickly so I don't forget any of the things I want to touch on, but really quick summary. Take a minute. Really appreciate everyone's time over the last 3 days. What's really exciting about this for me has been the conversations beyond initial adoption, really talking about what the community is doing, starting with micro-credentials, then moving into recognition, data collection, strategic investment, future directions. We've heard about how open breaks down barriers, how it allows accessible, personalized learning at scale, and what we're working on the structure to continue that work, to contextualize it into the future, specifically for our students and our courses. I would be remiss if I didn't ask everyone to please subscribe for updates if you're not getting them. This is how we can keep the community conversation going around Open Ed Live specifically, continuing some of these conversations. It's been such great engagement in the chat. I'd love to see that keep going. So if you could please make sure you're on that list, that'll make sure those lines of communication stay open. That'll stay on the side. Quick plug for the STARS repository. This is UCF's institutional repository where we've housed sessions for the last 2 years of Open Ed Live, and our current speakers will be there in the near future, so you can revisit these conversations. A reminder that the Open Ed Mike podcast is going to be featuring a lot of the people that you've heard this week. If you haven't checked it out already, presenters including Kevin Corcoran, Andy McKinney, Liliana Diaz, soon to be Virginia Clinton Lizelle, and Nicole Allen. So another place to continue that community-based conversation. Reminder to everyone that Open Education Week is next week. So this is the start of what's going to be a whole lot of really great programming and conversations. So let this energy take us into next week where we can keep building that larger community. And then just a whole bunch of thank yous. We've had a lot of work behind the scenes from this year's Open Ed Live Committee. Thank you to Kevin Corcoran, Lily Dubach, Amber Mullens, Nicole Bruce, Amanda Graff. I'm sorry, Amanda, you get to be senior lecturer completely. John Venecek and Jax Gonzalez, and special thanks to other supporters from the Center for Distributed Learning. huge thank you to our speakers. Looking forward to going back to these recordings and seeing all of these conversations one more time. And then a big thank you to our audience. Been so engaged. The drop-ins have been so great. Everyone sharing so much wisdom and community. I've learned a ton. And I just am excited for next year. So I hope we'll see everyone back in 2027 for the 4th Open Ed Live event. Really appreciate everyone's time and attention over the last few days. And I'm excited to see where the communities keep going forward.